contractors wants to know, does it actually pay off?
$50,000 in that case. A lot of contractors look at BIM or VDC and think, oh my God, it's overly complicated.
Just imagine the person who's fixing clash moving the ducts in real life.
That problem can repeat itself over and over and over again.
Even 2 hours, even 4 hours, even a few minutes.
Crushes the construction schedule, and that's not good.
Hey everyone, welcome back to New Vision Agency channel, and today we're diving into BIM and VDC bolts and nuts. Let's get the real about VDC. And today joining us is Sean O'Brien, our very own president on NVA in United States. Sean, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start with basics. A lot of contractors, BIM users, they think that BIM is really complex and expensive and really hard to start. What do you think about that? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that perception is definitely out there. I think that a lot of contractors look at BIM or VDC and think, oh my God, it's overly complicated. There's lots of money involved with programs and software and stuff like that. But part of that's true and part of it's not. Most of them think it's overkill for their basic jobs. But in reality, if they just use a little bit of it, I think they can come away with a benefit.
Yeah, I think they can start with not only like big, massive project, they can start with small ones.
Correct.
Yeah. Let's start with some misconceptions about that. Just a reminder, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tips and tricks. What are the pitfalls you can see when people use BIM and VDC in their projects?
There's a few common traps. First, they kind of overcomplicate things, right? They have these crazy detailed models and they don't really need to be that way. It would be something like handing a 200-page plans to a carpenter when all he needs is a basic sketch.
Yeah, I can get it, especially on coordination projects when, some BIM coordinator or someone, they asking for some detailing, but it doesn't need to be there.
No, it does not need to be that detailed. Second, there's an urge to apply really complex solutions to their models when simple overlays would work just fine for them.
What do you mean in complex solution for the project?
Well, they don't really need to add high-end software to the project to make it work when they can use like a basic tool, perhaps like overlay, to make things come clear in the BIM.
Yeah, I can get it actually. And I would say here the difference between different LOD used in the projects. Because we need to, when we are working with the client, with customer, we need to understand where they need high LOD or where they don't need it. Because sometimes it can be just costlier work because of high LOD, but it's used for coordination projects when it doesn't need to be there. For example, I don't know, I was working with some project where the coordinator wanted us to show the screws in the framing, but it just... And, we needed to talk to him and just ask why does he need it. And he's like, can be some clash. No, it can be clash with this because, coordination project, it's always, only to see the systems or framing because I'm the framing and and I am speaking from the framing side here. So
I think on a lot of BIM projects, you don't need to get down to the nut and bolt detail, which would be a very high level of LOD. You could start out with a lower level LOD and build yourself up to that point. So just keeping it simple as possible in the beginning is more important than going straight to the difficult stuff.
Yeah, and do you think it's important to tell people who start in work with BIM and VDC, they don't need to use so high LOD on the start?
Oh, absolutely. They should start out with something very simple. And then as the project progresses, they can add more LOD for it when they have more detailed drawings and stuff available to them.
And I think
I agree.
Probably when the customer, he's moving from the simple LOD, for example, from LOD 300, and then he's moving to LOD 500, it's using only on the as-built conditions, for example?
Yeah, I think LOD 4 and 500 would be used on more complicated projects. And I believe people can get benefit from just using a lower level of detail so that they can actually get benefit from, just trade clashes and things like that.
Yeah. If we're speaking about high LOD and low LOD, can you determine how people can actually choose which level of detail they need on their projects?
Yeah, it's crucial. It's like you need to balance what's important.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, you were just trying to outline the project and see where the major clashes are going to be. Then you use a lower level LOD, and as you progress to more developed drawings, then you would use more of a higher level LOD.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And why do you actually think that people end up with overcomplicating things in BIM and VDC?
I think that sometimes they get over enthusiastic,
Mm-hmm.
or they feel pressure that they have to deliver a certain amount to the client or the customer. And it, some of that's driven by specs and contract documents, but other times you can use BIM and get benefit from it even when you technically don't have to do it as a requirement of the project.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're integrating all the different trades and stuff like that, I think it's very important that you just focus on the big savings that you could get, like the big clashes between the HVAC guy and the plumbing guy, colliding into each
Yeah.
other, and then the wall guy having issues too. So
Yeah, I can get it. But just curious question. Were there any case when the client just wanted to overcomplicate things just because, okay, I want a beautiful model. I don't know why I want it, but I want it.
I can't think of a case that's come up, but you
Hmm.
probably can.
Yeah, actually, I asked the question just because, I had a case when we were doing prefab work and we have a lot of drawings in there. So we have tickets, we have layouts, we have everything. And sometimes we just got some request that, okay, can you show the additional dimension here? Or can you show the, I don't know, some different details, some nailing, some hangers on the joists or something like that. And sometimes people from Beam side or VDC side, they forget to ask questions, why do you need that? Because sometimes it's not really useful on field, for example, or it's not really useful on when the client is reading drawings, when the foreman is reading drawings. But sometimes it's just, okay, I need the additional dimension just because I want it. And it's not really usable. So when we are working on our drawings, on our work, we are always filtering and asking the client, why do you need that? Because, for example, we can actually, it's not hard to add additional things, but sometimes it's like wasting time. So, for example, even 2 hours, even 4 hours, even, I don't know, few minutes, but if it like 500 drawings with 2 minutes, it sometimes becomes
Can
some
add up.
wasting
Yeah,
time.
I think that it's important not to overcomplicate things,
Mm-hmm.
and you can give the field too much information,
Yeah.
so it's unusable to them, and then you've wasted a lot of time on the computer that doesn't benefit anyone. And the whole idea behind BIM is that we actually benefit the job site, and that's in material, construction schedule, everything.
Yeah, definitely. And overcomplicating drawings also they can actually overwhelm builders and they can not understand what is shown on our drawings.
Yeah, it's back to the story of the 200 pages of
Yeah.
blueprints for the carpenter that only needs a sketch, right?
Yeah. Okay, so if the overcomplicating is a problem, how can we fix and simplify that?
Well, if you look at like the what we call the 80/20 rule, 80% of the benefit to the project is from 20% of the effort, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to turn that around. And back to what we've been talking about, and not every project needs a hyper detailed BIM thing. We've got to start with the basics and build on to that.
For example, if I'm like the beginner of BIM coordinator and I don't know how to use BIM or anything like that, or I don't have enough money, for example, but I need to figure out crucial problems, can I somehow filter only the super important things? So, for example, even not look for like small clashes, but only for the
Sure.
big design
Yeah,
issues or
you
something like
could
that.
you could focus on the things that will be the biggest problems on the job
Mm-hmm.
site. That might be like trying to navigate the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, all the MEP trades together. That would be a good focus to start there. That would be like in the old days, we would overlay sheets and sketch out where
Mm-hmm.
the HVAC guy is versus where the plumber is. And so starting out with those big pieces is probably the most beneficial on a project.
I think this, like any 80 to 20 rules, it's applying to every sphere, not only in BIM. It's like the great balance, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's throughout. Coordinating the trades is probably key to avoiding the big clashes. We don't need full-blown 3D models to make it work. We just have to be able to coordinate the big pieces, and that will save us a lot of time and money out in the field, and less rework and, less waste of material and labor, and that's key.
Yeah, labor is actually the key because, I don't know, I think the most problem with labor is labor on site, not on like manufacturer or something like
Yeah,
that.
this entails rework and all these things that slow the project down too. It crushes a contract. It crushes the construction schedule, and that's not good.
Yeah, I think the construction schedule is like, I didn't have any project where the construction schedule didn't change during the project, Sometimes we have those like big jumps for 2 months, maybe we have 1 month shift in schedule or 2 months, and sometimes it's like it's because of coordination progress or it's like
Or just issues with RFIs,
yeah,
ASIs, addendums. The construction schedule doesn't get bigger for you. You just have to cram it all in and get it done.
yeah, definitely. Once on my project, I had a case where we couldn't sign off the model just because the architects were moving grid lines all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so if you're talking about the basics, what do you think like must have BIM tools that can use for the coordinators can use for start?
The first thing they should adopt is simple clash detection is absolute must on a project.
Yeah, I agree.
It helps prevent costly mistakes, and also using like a centralized model.
Like
Yeah,
workshop model
like
in BIM 360 or something.
like a model that's on ACC or BIM
Mm-hmm.
360, so that you can track all the different documents and everything like that. It's more called like a centralized document management
Mm-hmm.
model.
So, for example, for basics, must have things for BIM VDC, and it's like to first thing it's to find conflict anyway, like Navis works, like BIM issues, anything like this. And the second one is to keep all of the files and documentation in one place.
Correct. So everyone's on the same page at all times.
Yeah.
There's no like, oh, I was using these sets of drawings and the other guy was using these sets of drawings, and it never works together.
Yeah, I know,
It
but
becomes a problem.
it's interesting thing because sometimes people even using BIM, they can't get along with that.
If you're a contractor out there and you're unsure of what you should do to start out with BIM, feel free to contact us. You can find us on the web or in the description down below, and we'll help you out. We'll get you started.
Maybe you can give some example what is like minimum in BIM and VDC looks like in real life.
Yeah. So if you would imagine like a mid-size commercial job, for example, we want to model the basic HVAC, plumbing, and framing, the larger elements of the project. That would be like a basic model setup.
And I think basic things to look through at the project, it's for conflict between design and structural model or drawings.
Yeah, that should probably be added in there too. Yeah.
Probably framing is not so like big part because a lot of contractors still omit in framing. But I'm just framer, so I
Well,
want every
I
project
think,
to have framing.
yeah, I think the framing can be critical when there's HVAC or plumbing running
Yeah.
in conflicting with the critical studs, for example, or something like that, or
Mhm.
doors or whatever. So I think this is important. And then we might also want to like do basic modeling of the architectural and structural to make sure that everything is
Mhm.
buildable, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And just I'm not talking everything about framing, but once we had a case when because of framing the architecture was changed.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
build your framing. Before you mentioned like some old school methods, like before you were just overlaying the drawings to find the conflicts. Maybe you have some examples of that and how we can use those old school method now.
Well, I mean, I can remember a five-star hotel we were once building in the late 90s. This was
Mm-hmm.
before all the technology and really internet as we know it today. The contractor actually built several suites inside a warehouse, hotel suites inside a
Mhm.
warehouse, actual full-scale models with everything, all the finishes and everything, and then we had all the trades there, and we coordinated where
Oh my
fire
god.
protection was going, where plumbing was going, where HVAC was going with, an actual model of exactly what was gonna be built later on out in the field.
Did it
That
look like 5 people, 5 trades are staying in
Well,
the same
everyone
room?
had a time and a day to get in there and build out their stuff,
Oh my god.
and there was some pre-planning beforehand, but that was basically we took that clash detection,
In real life?
what would we call it? Yeah, clash detection in real life and, or model, real life model and actually used that and applied and fabricated all those pieces to fit those repetitive suites out on the job site later on. Today, we can use programs and software that will allow us to do this digitally.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because I would watch to people who just say, sometimes beam coordination it's moving like it's figure out in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes a lot of clashes just go into the field, but if they are building it in real time, they already think how to fix them. But now we're doing it in Navisworks or something like that.
They say the best way to deliver the project is to build it twice, once digitally, and then one time when it's correct out real life out in the field. And I think we have the technology and the programs we have today allow us to be so much more advanced than we were back in the day.
How before the overlays were done? Because it was like one paper drawings put in another paper drawings or something like that.
Before you might have to lay out some sketching paper
Mhm.
over the old drawings, sketch it out, and then transfer it to
Oh,
the new drawings to see what changed, right? Whatever you couldn't see with your naked eye, right? But now with the programs we have now, we can just do direct overlays on the screen.
yeah, especially on some platform like Procore or ACC, we can just already in that platform we can overlay them and it will highlight all of the changes. So
Yeah. Yeah, another example would be minimal layout points. So instead of overdoing site layout with tech, it'd be basically just place essential points on site with a laser.
I had a video about that, but when I recorded about Dusty Robotics with about layout points, and I think it's also some ways to find the appropriate way because sometimes we can just print everything on the concrete, but to make it easier, cheaper, and faster, probably layout points will be a great solution for
Yeah,
that.
you can also print too much on the floor
Mm-hmm.
with the robots. Then the model gets transitioned to the floor and it gets cluttered for all the trades, so that's not
Mm-hmm.
helpful either. But the most important parts would be, yeah.
Yeah,
And layout points would be a lesser of that, but still good, valuable.
I think it will be like required minimum.
Yeah, required minimum. I agree
Mm-hmm.
with that.
Okay, Sean, maybe you can talk a little bit about how the BIM and VDC changed over time. Maybe there are new tools and methods that are changing or becoming more accessible.
In the beginning, they were very complicated and very expensive, right?
Of course, yeah.
So for many of the contractors, these BIM VDC tools were totally out of reach.
So we can say the first BIM tools, they were like too expensive or too complicated for just a regular user to start with it.
Yeah, it was probably more like a luxurious brand
Oh.
when you actually just need a jacket to keep you warm instead of buying the Louis Vuitton, right?
Oh yeah. But now it's compared not like Louis Vuitton, it's kind
Yeah.
of mass market.
Now we have cloud-based platforms that allow teams to access it from the cloud,
Mhm.
making it easier for them to where they don't have to have such a huge upfront investment to use BIM or VDC tools.
Now I think it becomes easier just for people to just jump to VDC. It's not so difficult like it was before, right?
Yeah, there's not such a barrier
Mm-hmm.
that even for small teams or small projects to get benefit from VDC with the way that programs are designed nowadays.
That's really great to hear. And I think it really allows for small teams to work with BIM to make their project right. Because I'm really a big fan of BIM because, I think every project in that like Earth should be done with BIM. Let's talk about money. I think contractors wants to know, does it actually pay off? Maybe you have any example or any metrics when we can say the contractor saved actually on a project where he didn't use BIM and now he's used BIM.
One project comes to mind is there was a contractor that was building residential projects, and what would normally take their crew 5 days to stand a floor with all the framing in a traditional method, by implementing BIM, they were able to cut that time by 2 days. So basically 3 days instead of 5 days.
Oh my God, it's a half.
Yeah. Well, almost. It's at least
Yeah.
40% savings. It was significant.
Yeah, and I think it's really great when, for example, if I were the contractor who are starting using BIM and I come to you and would you tell me those examples that to convince me use BIM?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that you're going to have to make a little investment by implementing BIM, but the savings can be significant in material and labor.
I think it's working like each business, you invest on the start, but then you're winning the game.
Exactly. Exactly. If a contractor is willing to invest a little bit of money in software and a little bit of time and training, let's say it's a number of like $5,000 to get started out, they could end up saving 10 times that amount on a job, and that's $50,000 in that case, right?
Mhm.
So it's good savings for even the smallest job.
Yeah, I think just because of a lot of contractors, they are afraid to spend money on the start when, it's like human thing when you're afraid to spend a lot of money on the start, but then you don't believe it will pay off or something. But actually with BIM, I think we can be sure it will pay off.
Yeah, because you really have the ability to build the project digitally
Yeah.
before you do it in real life. And, just the threat of, having to do rework or ordering too much material or material that has to be redone is enough to get people to think that, hey, we need to implement some form of BIM or VDC.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And I can think about a case what we had just a few months ago. It's even, preliminary buyout of the wood for the wood residential project. Sometimes it's like calculated by Excel schedules or something like that, just because some, I don't know, schedules. But with BIM, for now, we are doing this thing like preliminary takeoff when we create like basic model with no detailing. It's really fast to create. It's really easy to create, but we can produce material list that is close to real wood that will be spanned there. And we even get a feedback that it really saved money on like preliminary buyout.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very minimal investment, but saves a lot in the
Yeah.
end, especially when you're talking about, so much board feet of lumber on a big project.
Yeah,
It's significant.
I think so. Just because, we can even not like create the whole project, but still have some benefit from using BIM in that case.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think also using BIM is crucial for now just because, if we find the clash, for example, we can just imagine even that case you told about creating the unit on the factory. Just imagine the person who is fixing clash moving the ducts in real life and the person who is moving that in the computer, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's easier.
It's very easy to move, a 30 by 42-inch duct on in the computer than it is out in the field.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, and so a small investment goes a long way. And the problem with, not catching it early digitally is that problem can repeat itself over and over and over again out in the field because you have that repetitiveness
Yeah,
of it.
the same problem in the same place.
The
in
same
different
problem
place.
over and over and over
Yeah.
again. On a lot of residential projects and even office projects, there's a typical unit that's repeated over and
Yeah.
over again. So this is where you can really save by using BIM,
Hmm.
by solving all the issues with that one typical unit and then applying it out in the job site before any material or labor is delivered.
Yeah, I think so. And even if we have something on the field, they will just take the drones. It's already everything fixed in the drawings, and they're just built, and that's it. I
Mm.
like that.
Yeah. I agree.
What's your final takeaway for the contractors listening today?
I think you don't have to go all in on BIM or make a huge investment. You can start out small and get benefits right away. Just think about starting out with basic and build up from there. At New Vision, we even teach contractors, their teams, subcontractors, and how to implement BIM into their projects and bring more profit to the bottom line.
Yeah, actually, I can agree with that because, our team is always really flexible to help and work with different client approach. And, we can guide the contractors or our client just to make smooth workflow, for example, or this like smooth becoming BIM person.
Yeah, if we can teach the subcontractors to use basic BIM practices, then we can help them meet their contract deadlines, prevent rework, and bring more profit to the bottom line.
To everyone listening, if you're curious about BIM or want to implement something in your project or want to save money on your project, don't be hesitate to reach out to us. Follow the link below this video. And this is Anyway, and take care.